Have you ever wondered why some survive when others break? Why some find meaning in the midst of agony, while others succumb to despair? In a world that seems to pile suffering upon suffering, why is it that some still rise, not despite their pain, but because of it? The answer lies in the quiet choices we make, choices so simple, so subtle, that they often go unnoticed. Yet, within them rests a power that no circumstance can diminish. These choices transcend the storm of suffering, and in their practice, one discovers the depth of human resilience. In the vast labyrinth of suffering, each human spirit stands at a crossroads. The weight of suffering is unbearable, yet there is something within the soul, a spark, a fire, that remains untouched by the cruelty of circumstance. Viktor Frankl, a man who endured the unspeakable horrors of Nazi concentration camps, found in this very darkness a profound truth. We may not always control what happens to us, but we always control how we respond. It is in that response, in the choices we make, that our true power lies. It is these 5 quiet choices that not only define our survival, but shape our very essence. The first choice is one of acceptance. Not passive resignation, but an active acceptance that the world does not owe us ease, nor does it guarantee us justice. The world, in all its chaotic beauty and brutality, is indifferent to our personal desires. The suffering we face is often senseless, beyond our control, but our ability to choose how we meet it, this is where our true freedom lies. There is immense strength in surrendering to the inevitable, not in a defeatist manner, but in the recognition that resistance to pain is futile. In every moment of suffering, there is a moment of choice, to accept the burden of what is, or to fight against it, prolonging our agony. Frankl's words echo through the corridors of human existence. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. To accept pain is not to glorify it or embrace it blindly, but to see it as part of the human experience. To acknowledge that suffering is not only unavoidable, but can be an instrument of transformation. It is in this acceptance that the path to transcendence begins. When you stop resisting what is, you make room for something greater, something beyond the self. The second choice is the decision to find meaning. In the midst of suffering, it can be easy to lose sight of purpose. The mind, clouded by anguish, whispers that there is no point to the struggle. Yet, the human spirit is not meant to languish in meaninglessness. Frankl's life, his very survival, was a testament to this truth. In the concentration camps, where hope was a distant memory, Frankl found meaning in the smallest of things: the way the sun rose each morning, the memories of his loved ones, the thought of reuniting with them someday. Each person, in their darkest hour, has the potential to find meaning, not in the suffering itself, but in the way they choose to relate to it. Meaning is not a gift bestowed upon us. It is something we must create. The human being is a meaning-making creature. If suffering is inevitable, then so too is the search for meaning in it. To seek meaning is to give the suffering a purpose, to transform it into something that shapes the person you become, rather than a weight that crushes you. The third choice is to take responsibility. In a world where chaos reigns and injustice is rampant, it is easy to abdicate responsibility, to blame circumstances, others, or fate. But true strength lies in taking full ownership of our response to life. We cannot control the events that unfold before us, but we can control how we engage with them. Responsibility is not about guilt or blame, but about the radical act of stepping into the arena of life and owning our responses. In every moment, we have the choice to be passive victims or active participants in our own lives. It is through this responsibility that we reclaim our power. When Frankl was faced with the horrors of the concentration camp, he took responsibility for his inner world. He could not control the brutality around him, but he could control how he responded to it. And in that control, he found his freedom. The fourth choice is courage, the courage to face the unknown, the uncertainty of life, and the pain that inevitably follows. Fear is the natural response to suffering. It is a primal instinct to recoil, to escape, to avoid. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite it. It is the ability to move forward, even when every fiber of your being screams to retreat. Courage is found in the small, quiet moments. The decision to rise when the world tells you to stay down. The choice to love when your heart is broken. The willingness to hope when all seems lost. It is in these moments of courage that we discover the depth of our own strength. Frankl, in his darkest hours, embodied this courage, not by denying the fear, but by choosing to live with it. And finally, the fifth choice is the decision to transcend, to rise above the self, the pain, and the circumstances, and to connect with something greater. The transcendent moment is the one where the soul stretches beyond the confines of the individual, where meaning, purpose, and strength are found in service to others, in devotion to something higher than the self. It is in this transcendence that we are liberated from the tyranny of suffering. The paradox is this: the more we focus on ourselves, the more the pain consumes us. But when we transcend the self, when we look beyond our own suffering to the greater good or the higher meaning, we find that the pain becomes bearable. We are not diminished by it, we are made stronger. In the quiet choices that shape us, there lies a profound paradox. The very act of embracing suffering, rather than avoiding it, makes us stronger than the pain itself. For it is in the moment of transcendence that we discover our true nature, not as victims of fate, but as co-creators of our existence. The soul, once freed from the chains of self-centeredness, experiences a liberation that no external force can take away. When Viktor Frankl wrote about the human will to find meaning, he did not speak of a passive hope or a naive optimism. He spoke of a fierce, unrelenting force, the kind of strength that arises from within when one chooses to stand tall in the face of adversity. Meaning, as Frankl saw it, is not handed to us as a gift. It is a responsibility, an active pursuit. It is in the process of seeking meaning that we discover our resilience. We must choose it, actively and without hesitation. This leads to the fourth quiet choice, the choice to take action in the face of uncertainty. In a world brimming with unpredictability, the temptation to freeze, to stand still, can be overwhelming. The unknown can feel like a dark abyss, a chasm too vast to cross. Yet, there is a power in movement, no matter how small or uncertain the steps may be. To move forward, even in the absence of certainty, is an act of strength. When life presents itself as an unknowable future, we often hesitate to act because we fear the wrong choice. But Frankl's wisdom teaches us that the absence of certainty does not negate our capacity to choose. In the face of the unknown, we have the freedom to act, to take that first step into the uncertainty of the future. Each step, no matter how tentative, reaffirms our capacity for choice. Even when the path is unclear, movement itself becomes a powerful statement of faith in life. We are all, in some sense, in a constant battle with the unknown. We may not know what tomorrow holds, and we cannot foresee the next wave of suffering that will crash upon us. But we can choose to act, to move, to engage with life in the here and now. The willingness to take action, even when the ground beneath us is unstable, is a declaration of our sovereignty over our own fate. In these moments, we prove to ourselves that we are not defined by our circumstances, but by our response to them. And yet, it is in the practice of choosing that we face our greatest challenge. It is so easy to succumb to despair when the weight of suffering presses upon us. It is tempting to withdraw into ourselves, to retreat into the safety of numbness or avoidance. But this is the danger. When we choose avoidance, we rob ourselves of our humanity. For to be human is to choose, to act, to engage with the world despite its imperfections. Frankl, in his darkest moments, did not retreat from life. He chose to engage with it, to seek meaning even in the most incomprehensible of circumstances. And it is this act of engagement, of choosing to meet life on its own terms, that gives us the power to transcend suffering. It is not by running from our pain, but by facing it, that we discover our strength. This brings us to the fifth quiet choice, the choice to embrace suffering as part of the human condition. To do this is not to glorify pain or to seek it out, but to recognize that suffering is an inescapable aspect of life. It is not an enemy to be defeated, but a companion to be understood. In embracing suffering, we find that it is not a force that weakens us, but one that has the potential to transform us. Each time we face pain head-on, we build strength, endurance, and resilience. Each time we choose to stand in the face of adversity, we add to our arsenal of inner resources. Suffering is not the antithesis of life, it is an integral part of it. This radical acceptance of suffering is not a surrender to fate, but a reclaiming of our power. When we accept suffering as a part of life, we stop fighting against it and start using it to fuel our growth. We no longer allow ourselves to be consumed by pain. Instead, we channel it, transform it, and use it to build something greater. It is in this acceptance that we become truly free. For in the absence of resistance, suffering loses its power over us. It can no longer dictate our emotions, our actions, or our sense of self-worth. In the quiet of acceptance, we reclaim our autonomy. We choose to define ourselves, not by the suffering we endure, but by the way we choose to meet it. This, then, is the culmination of the 5 quiet choices. In the act of accepting suffering, seeking meaning, taking responsibility, moving forward in uncertainty, and transcending the self, we discover a strength that surpasses the very pain we thought would destroy us. There is no greater triumph than the ability to find freedom in the midst of suffering, to transcend the limitations of the self, and to choose life, even when the world seems determined to take it from us. It is this strength, this quiet resilience, that empowers us to endure, to grow, and to ultimately transcend the circumstances that would otherwise define us. In the quiet choices we make, we find the deepest kind of freedom. The freedom to transcend our circumstances, the freedom to transform pain into purpose, and the freedom to emerge from suffering not weakened, but stronger. It is a paradox that few truly understand until they have stood face to face with their own darkest hour. But it is this very paradox that holds the key to human resilience. That suffering, when met with courage, meaning, and responsibility, does not diminish the spirit. It refines it. Frankl understood this truth at the core of his being. In the concentration camps, where physical pain, hunger, and loss were constant companions, he discovered a truth so profound that it reshaped not only his own life, but the lives of those he would later teach. The human being is not a passive recipient of suffering. We are active participants in it, capable of choosing our response to the harshest of conditions. This is where the concept of freedom becomes a cornerstone of resilience. Freedom is not merely the absence of external constraint. It is the inner freedom to choose, to create meaning, and to decide who we will become in the face of adversity. This freedom is always available to us, even when all else is stripped away. Frankl's life is the embodiment of this freedom. Even in the most dehumanizing conditions, he was able to retain his sense of autonomy, not by rejecting his pain, but by choosing to find meaning within it. The liberation that Frankl speaks of is not the freedom to avoid suffering, for that is a freedom unavailable to anyone. We cannot choose to be free from the trials of life, but we can choose how we engage with those trials. We can choose to see in them an opportunity for growth, for self-discovery, and for transcendence. In each act of choice, we carve out a space for meaning in our lives. The courage to take responsibility, even in the most extreme of circumstances, is not something that can be understood through intellectual reasoning alone. It must be experienced, lived. Responsibility is not about moral guilt, nor is it about accepting blame for the suffering that comes our way. It is about the radical acceptance that we are responsible for our own responses, our own attitudes, and our own actions. In the face of suffering, it is easy to fall into the trap of blaming the world, blaming others, or blaming ourselves. Yet, Frankl's insight was that the only thing we are truly responsible for is how we respond. This responsibility is not burdensome, it is liberating. For in embracing responsibility, we reclaim our power. We cease to be passive victims of circumstance and become active participants in our own lives. This understanding of responsibility transforms our relationship to suffering. It shifts our perspective from one of helplessness to one of agency. We may not be able to control the external world, but we can control the internal world. And it is within this inner world that we find our greatest freedom. In this space of personal responsibility, we begin to see suffering not as an obstacle to happiness, but as a pathway to a deeper, more meaningful existence. Pain is no longer a force that destroys us. Instead, it becomes the forge in which our strength is shaped. It is through suffering that we are made strong, not because of the pain itself, but because of the way we choose to meet it. And it is in the practice of choosing, moment by moment, that we build resilience. Resilience is not a trait that some are born with and others lack. It is a skill that can be cultivated through the small, quiet decisions we make every day. It is the decision to rise when the weight of the world seems unbearable. It is the decision to continue searching for meaning, even when the search feels futile. It is the decision to take responsibility for our own growth, even when the path forward is unclear. Resilience is not about being invincible. It is about the courage to keep going, even when everything within us wants to stop. It is about the ability to endure, to adapt, and to transcend. It is about the quiet determination to keep choosing meaning, choosing responsibility, choosing to act in the face of uncertainty, and choosing to rise above the self. This process of transcending the self is what leads us to the deepest form of freedom, the freedom from the tyranny of the ego. The ego, with its endless desires and fears, is the source of much of our suffering. It is the ego that seeks to control, to resist, to protect itself at all costs. But when we transcend the ego, we transcend the suffering that comes with it. We free ourselves from the limitations of the self and open ourselves to a higher way of being. In transcending the self, we discover a deeper connection to others, to the world, and to something greater than ourselves. It is in this connection that we find true meaning, true strength, and true resilience. For when we transcend the ego, we are no longer defined by our suffering or our desires. We become part of a larger, more universal story, a story that stretches beyond the self, beyond the individual, and touches upon the eternal. And so, the quiet choices we make, the choice to accept suffering, to seek meaning, to take responsibility, to move forward in uncertainty, and to transcend the self, are not just choices that help us survive. They are choices that help us thrive. They are the foundation upon which we build a life that is not defined by our pain, but by our strength to rise above it.